Behind the elegant Victorian mirror that graced the wedding portrait of Eleanor and James Blackwood lay a reflection that would haunt historians for decades to come. What appeared to be a standard formal wedding photograph from October 12, 1897, would become one of the most investigated and controversial images in the archives of the Metropolitan Museum of Photography, not for what it showed in plain sight, but for the impossible figure that stared back from within the ornate-looking glass that decorated the photographer's studio. Professor Diana Marshall, senior curator of historical photography at Columbia University, had been examining 19th-century wedding portraits for her upcoming exhibition on Victorian matrimonial customs when she encountered the Blackwood photograph in a collection recently acquired from the estate of a prominent New York family. The image had been carefully preserved in a leather-bound album, alongside dozens of other formal portraits that documented 3 generations of aristocratic weddings and social gatherings. The Blackwood wedding portrait followed the conventional composition standards of its era, with the bride and groom positioned in the center of the frame, Eleanor resplendent in an elaborate white silk gown adorned with intricate beadwork and lace, while James stood beside her in formal black evening wear, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. Behind the couple, an ornate mirror with an elaborate gilt frame served as a decorative backdrop, its polished surface designed to add depth and elegance to the studio arrangement. Professor Marshall had been using advanced digital enhancement techniques to restore faded details in the historical photographs when she began to notice anomalies in the mirror's reflection that defied logical explanation. While the mirror should have shown the reverse image of the photographer's studio, including the camera equipment and perhaps the photographer himself, the reflection instead displayed something that made her question everything she understood about Victorian photography and the nature of documented reality. The first anomaly that caught Professor Marshall's attention was the presence of a third figure in the mirror's reflection, positioned between the bride and groom in a way that suggested this person had been standing directly behind the couple during the photography session. But according to all available documentation about the wedding ceremony and portrait session, only Eleanor and James had been present in the studio with the photographer Cornelius Ashworth, who was known throughout New York society for his exceptional skill in formal portraiture. The mysterious figure in the mirror appeared to be a woman wearing dark clothing that contrasted sharply with the formal wedding attire of the bride and groom. Her face was partially obscured by what seemed to be a black veil or mourning dress, giving her an ominous presence that seemed entirely inappropriate for a joyful wedding celebration. Most disturbing of all, the figure appeared to be reaching toward the couple with outstretched hands, as if attempting to grasp or separate them. Professor Marshall immediately contacted Dr. Richard Hayes, the museum's chief authentication specialist and an expert in detecting photographic manipulation and fraud in historical images. Dr. Hayes had spent over 20 years developing techniques for identifying altered photographs, double exposures, and composite images that had been created through various 19th-century photographic tricks and techniques. Dr. Hayes's initial examination of the Blackwood portrait revealed no signs of manipulation or artificial construction. The photographic emulsion showed consistent aging patterns throughout the image. The lighting was uniform across all elements of the composition, and chemical analysis confirmed that the entire photograph had been created during a single exposure session. The technical evidence eliminated the possibility that the mysterious figure had been added to the image after its original creation. The authentication process left Professor Marshall and Dr. Hayes confronting the disturbing reality that the figure in the mirror had actually been present during the October 1897 photography session, despite the absence of any documentation or witness accounts that could explain her identity or purpose for being there. Professor Marshall initiated a comprehensive investigation into the Blackwood family history, hoping to identify the mysterious woman and understand her connection to the wedding celebration. The research began with the extensive family records that had been preserved, along with the photograph collection, providing detailed documentation of the Blackwood family's social connections and activities during the late 19th century. The family records revealed that Eleanor Blackwood had been born Eleanor Whitmore, the daughter of a prosperous shipping merchant who had established his fortune during the California gold rush. She had married James Blackwood, heir to a banking dynasty that had been prominent in New York financial circles, since the early 1800s. The marriage had been considered one of the most important social events of the 1897 season, with over 300 guests attending the ceremony at Trinity Church. According to contemporary newspaper accounts, the wedding had been a lavish affair that had captured the attention of New York society columns for weeks. The celebration had included an elaborate reception at the Blackwood family mansion on Fifth Avenue, followed by a formal portrait session with Cornelius Ashworth, whose studio had been the preferred choice of wealthy families seeking to commemorate important occasions. But as Professor Marshall delved deeper into the family correspondence and personal documents, she began to discover references to troubling events that had occurred in the months leading up to the wedding. Eleanor's personal diary, which had been preserved among the family papers, contained several entries describing disturbing dreams and waking visions that had begun plaguing her during the summer of 1897. According to Eleanor's diary entries, the visions had involved a woman in dark clothing who appeared to be warning her about impending danger or tragedy. The mysterious woman had communicated through gestures and expressions rather than words, but Eleanor had understood that she was being urged to reconsider her marriage to James or face terrible consequences. Eleanor had initially dismissed the visions as pre-wedding anxiety, but they had become increasingly frequent and vivid as the October wedding date approached. The diary revealed that she had consulted with her family physician, Dr. Harrison Blake, who had attributed the experiences to nervous exhaustion and had prescribed rest and relaxation to calm her troubled mind. Dr. Blake's medical notes, which Professor Marshall discovered in the archives of New York Medical College, provided additional insight into Eleanor's condition during the months before her wedding. The physician had documented a pattern of symptoms that included insomnia, unexplained anxiety, and what he described as nervous hallucinations involving a deceased person who seemed to be attempting communication. The medical records revealed that Dr. Blake had been particularly concerned about Eleanor's claims that the mysterious woman had shown her glimpses of future events, including scenes of tragedy and loss that would befall the Blackwood family. The doctor had considered recommending postponement of the wedding, but Eleanor's family had insisted that the ceremony proceed as planned. Professor Marshall's investigation revealed that Eleanor's premonitions had proved remarkably accurate. The Blackwood family had indeed experienced a series of tragedies in the years following the 1897 wedding, beginning with James's sudden death from pneumonia in 1899, just 2 years after the marriage. Eleanor had never remarried after James's death, and she had spent the remainder of her life claiming that she continued to receive visits from the mysterious woman who had first appeared to her before the wedding. Family members had attributed Eleanor's ongoing visions to grief-induced delusions, but her detailed predictions about family events had proved accurate with disturbing frequency. The family tragedy records documented a pattern of deaths and misfortunes that had befallen 3 generations of Blackwoods, including premature deaths, financial disasters, and mental illness that had ultimately led to the extinction of the family line by the 1960s. The pattern suggested that Eleanor's mysterious visitor had been warning about a curse or supernatural persecution that would plague the family for decades. Dr. Hayes's technical analysis of the wedding portrait revealed additional anomalies that became apparent only under extreme magnification and digital enhancement. The mysterious figure in the mirror showed characteristics that were inconsistent with normal photographic reproduction, including transparency effects and light distortion, that suggested she existed in a different dimensional state than the solid bride and groom. The figure's clothing and appearance, when enhanced through digital restoration, revealed details that suggested she had died during an earlier historical period, possibly the Civil War era, based on the style of her mourning dress and the arrangement of her hair. The anachronistic elements implied that the woman had been attempting to communicate across decades of time to warn Eleanor about the family's approaching troubles. Professor Marshall contacted Dr. Sarah Chen, a specialist in paranormal photography at the Institute for Anomalous Research at Princeton University. Dr. Chen had spent her career investigating photographic evidence of supernatural phenomena, developing techniques for analyzing images that appeared to document experiences beyond normal physical reality. Dr. Chen's examination of the Blackwood portrait revealed electromagnetic signatures that were consistent with what she had observed in other cases involving photographic documentation of spirit manifestation. According to her analysis, the mirror had somehow served as a dimensional interface that allowed the deceased woman to manifest visually during the photography session. The dimensional interface theory explained how the mysterious figure could appear in the mirror's reflection without being physically present in the photographer's studio. The mirror had functioned as a portal between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, allowing the spirit to project her image and warning across the dimensional boundary. Dr. Chen's research revealed that mirrors had long been associated with supernatural phenomena and spirit communication in various cultural traditions. The reflective surface could serve as a viewing window between different planes of existence, particularly when emotional stress or spiritual urgency created optimal conditions for interdimensional communication. The investigation attracted the attention of genealogical researchers who specialized in tracing family histories and identifying connections between historical events and supernatural manifestations. The research revealed that the mysterious woman in the mirror bore a strong resemblance to Catherine Blackwood, James's aunt, who had died during the Civil War in 1863. Catherine Blackwood had been known as a spiritualist and medium who had claimed the ability to communicate with deceased relatives and predict future events. According to family records, she had warned various family members about impending dangers and had demonstrated remarkable accuracy in her psychic abilities before her death from typhoid fever at the age of 28. The family correspondence from the Civil War period contained several letters written by Catherine, in which she had predicted that the Blackwood family would face a generation of tragedy and loss that would be triggered by a marriage that should not take place. She had specifically warned that a future Blackwood bride would ignore spiritual warnings and proceed with a wedding that would bring disaster to the entire family line. The genealogical research revealed that Catherine had died exactly 34 years before Eleanor and James's wedding, and that she had requested to be buried with a hand mirror that had been her most prized possession. The mirror had been inscribed with a message expressing her hope that she would be able to continue watching over and protecting her family even after death. Professor Marshall's investigation of the Ashworth photography studio revealed that the ornate mirror used as a backdrop for the Blackwood wedding portrait had been acquired from an estate sale in 1895, 2 years before the wedding photograph was taken. The mirror had previously belonged to the Blackwood family and had been sold along with other household furnishings after the death of James's grandmother. The studio records showed that Cornelius Ashworth had purchased several pieces of elegant furniture and decorative items from the Blackwood estate sale, including the gilt-framed mirror that had been a focal point of the family's formal parlor for over 30 years. The mirror had likely been present in the Blackwood home during Catherine's lifetime and may have served as her primary tool for spiritual communication. The discovery that the mirror had belonged to Catherine Blackwood provided a direct connection between the deceased spiritualist and her manifestation in her nephew's wedding portrait. The mirror had served as her portal for continuing to watch over and warn her family, even decades after her physical death. Dr. Chen's paranormal research revealed that personal objects, particularly mirrors and other reflective surfaces, could retain electromagnetic imprints of their former owner's consciousness and continue to facilitate spiritual communication long after death. The phenomenon was particularly strong when the deceased person had possessed psychic abilities during their lifetime. The electromagnetic imprinting explained how Catherine's consciousness had remained connected to the mirror and how she had been able to manifest her image during the wedding photography session. Her appearance had been triggered by her urgent need to warn Eleanor about the tragic consequences that would follow if the marriage proceeded as planned. The investigation revealed that similar mirror manifestations had been documented at other locations where Catherine Blackwood's personal possessions had been placed. Antique dealers and collectors who had acquired items from the Blackwood estate had reported strange reflections and apparitions appearing in mirrors, picture frames and other reflective objects that had belonged to the deceased spiritualist. Professor Marshall established communication with descendants of families who had purchased Blackwood estate items, documenting a pattern of supernatural manifestations that had occurred whenever the objects had been present during significant family events. The manifestations had consistently involved warnings about impending tragedies or attempts to guide family decisions towards safer outcomes. The pattern of manifestations suggested that Catherine Blackwood's consciousness had been distributed among her personal possessions and that she had been attempting to continue her protective activities through whatever objects remained connected to her spiritual energy. The wedding portrait mirror had provided her with the opportunity to deliver her most important warning about the approaching family curse. Hayes's continued technical analysis revealed that the mirror manifestation had affected the entire photographic image in subtle but measurable ways. The electromagnetic presence had created micro-distortions throughout the photograph that became apparent only under advanced digital analysis, suggesting that Catherine's spiritual energy had influenced the entire photography session. The distortion analysis revealed that Catherine's manifestation had been strongest during the actual moment of photographic exposure, indicating that she had timed her appearance to coincide with the creation of a permanent visual record. The timing suggested deliberate intent to create lasting evidence of her warning that would eventually be discovered by future investigators. The research attracted international attention from universities and museums that specialized in paranormal historical documentation. The Blackwood wedding portrait became a landmark case study in spirit photography and served as evidence that supernatural manifestations could be documented through conventional photographic techniques. The Columbia University exhibition, featuring the Blackwood portrait, drew unprecedented crowds and media attention, with visitors coming from around the world to view the mysterious mirror reflection. The photograph became one of the most studied and discussed examples of supernatural documentation in academic and popular circles. Professor Marshall established the Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation, creating a specialized collection for photographs and other artifacts that appeared to contain evidence of supernatural phenomena. The archive provided resources for researchers studying the intersection between spiritual manifestations and historical documentation. The archive attracted donations of similar photographs and artifacts from families around the world who had experienced supernatural manifestations connected to historical objects and images. The collection revealed that spirit photography was far more common than previously recognized, with hundreds of documented cases spanning multiple centuries and cultures. Dr. Chen's research expanded to include comprehensive studies of mirror manifestations and their role in facilitating communication between the living and the dead. The research revealed that reflective surfaces had served as spiritual communication tools throughout human history, with consistent reports of apparitions and messages appearing in mirrors during times of crisis or important family events. The mirror communication research attracted support from technology companies interested in developing electronic devices that could enhance or facilitate spiritual communication. The companies recognized that understanding the electromagnetic principles underlying mirror manifestations could lead to breakthrough developments in consciousness, research, and communication technology. The research collaboration between academic institutions and technology companies led to the development of enhanced photographic analysis techniques that could detect even the subtlest signs of supernatural manifestation in historical images. The techniques revealed that spirit photography was far more prevalent than conventional analysis had suggested. Professor Marshall's investigation of the Blackwood portrait established new standards for documenting and analyzing paranormal historical artifacts while maintaining appropriate scientific rigor and skepticism. The investigation demonstrated that supernatural phenomena could be studied objectively without compromising academic credibility or scientific methodology. The success of the Blackwood investigation inspired similar research projects at universities around the world, creating a new field of academic study that combined historical research with paranormal investigation. The field attracted scholars from multiple disciplines who were interested in exploring the intersection between documented history and supernatural phenomena. Eleanor Blackwood's diary, which had been crucial to understanding the context of the mirror manifestation, was donated to the Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation, where it became a valuable resource for researchers studying the psychological and spiritual aspects of supernatural encounters. The diary provided detailed first-hand accounts of spirit communication that complemented the photographic evidence. The diary research revealed that Eleanor had continued to document her encounters with Catherine's spirit throughout her life, creating a comprehensive record of ongoing communication that spanned several decades. The documentation provided insights into how spiritual relationships could continue and evolve long after physical death. Dr. Chen's analysis of Eleanor's spiritual experiences revealed patterns that were consistent with genuine psychic communication, rather than psychological delusion or wishful thinking. The accuracy of Eleanor's predictions and the specific details of her encounters with Catherine's spirit suggested authentic supernatural contact. The authentication of Eleanor's spiritual experiences validated the reality of the mirror manifestation in the wedding portrait, while providing context for understanding Catherine's motives and methods for attempting to warn her family about approaching dangers. The spirit communication had been motivated by genuine love and concern rather than malevolent intent. The Blackwood family curse that Catherine had attempted to prevent through her wedding portrait warning was eventually broken when the last surviving family member, a distant cousin, donated all remaining Blackwood possessions to museums and charitable organizations. The distribution of the objects appeared to release Catherine's consciousness from her protective obligations, ending decades of supernatural manifestations. The resolution of the Blackwood family spiritual situation provided researchers with insights into how supernatural manifestations could be resolved through appropriate acknowledgement and action. The case demonstrated that spirit communication often involved practical requests or warnings that could be addressed through understanding and cooperation. Professor Marshall often reflected on the extraordinary investigation that had begun with a mysterious reflection in a wedding portrait and evolved into groundbreaking research that expanded understanding of supernatural phenomena and historical documentation. The Blackwood case had proven that some photographs captured more than visual images, but also preserved spiritual messages that spanned decades and generations. The archive for paranormal historical documentation continued to grow, attracting researchers and artifacts from around the world while advancing scientific understanding of supernatural phenomena. The archive demonstrated that spiritual manifestations were legitimate subjects for academic study and historical preservation. As paranormal historical research matured into a recognized academic discipline, the Blackwood wedding portrait remained its foundational case study, proving that supernatural manifestations could be documented, analyzed, and understood through scientific methodology. The mysterious figure in the mirror had opened doorways to new understanding of the relationship between consciousness, photography, and the persistence of love beyond death. The investigation that had begun with impossible reflections in an ornate Victorian mirror had ultimately revealed that death was not the absolute boundary that most people believed, but rather a transition that allowed consciousness to continue protecting and guiding loved ones through whatever means were available. Catherine Blackwood had shown that some love was strong enough to transcend death and find ways to warn, protect, and communicate across the vast divide between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The wedding portrait that had started as a joyful celebration of matrimony had become a testament to the enduring power of family love and spiritual protection, proving that some photographs preserved not just moments in time, but eternal bonds that continued to influence and protect family members across generations. The mirror had captured more than just reflections, but had documented the infinite love that connected souls across the boundaries of life and death. But the implications of Catherine Blackwood's mirror manifestation extended far beyond a single family's supernatural protection. 5 years after the establishment of the Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation, Professor Marshall received evidence that would transform their understanding of spirit photography from isolated occurrences to systematic documentation of a vast network of spiritual guardians who had been protecting families throughout American history. The evidence came from Dr. Michael Torres, a digital archaeology specialist at Stanford University, who had been developing advanced image enhancement techniques for analyzing historical photographs. Dr. Torres had applied his new algorithms to thousands of 19th-century family portraits and wedding photographs, revealing patterns of supernatural manifestations that had been invisible to previous analysis methods. According to Dr. Torres's research, Approximately 15% of formal family portraits taken between 1850 and 1900 contained evidence of spiritual manifestations that were only detectable through advanced digital enhancement. The manifestations included figures appearing in mirrors, windows, and other reflective surfaces, as well as anomalous light patterns and electromagnetic disturbances that suggested the presence of deceased family members during photography sessions. Professor Marshall realized that Catherine Blackwood's warning in the wedding portrait mirror represented one component of a massive spiritual protection network that had been operating throughout American history. Deceased family members had been systematically manifesting in photographs to provide warnings, guidance, and protection for their living relatives. Dr. Torres's analysis revealed that the spiritual manifestations followed consistent patterns that suggested organized activity rather than random supernatural occurrences. The spirits appeared most frequently during significant family events such as weddings, births, and coming-of-age celebrations, with their manifestations often serving to warn about impending dangers or provide guidance for important decisions. The systematic nature of the spiritual protection network attracted the attention of historians who had been studying unexplained patterns in American family histories. The research revealed that families with documented spiritual manifestations in their photographs had consistently experienced better survival rates during epidemics, natural disasters, and economic crises compared to families without supernatural protection. Dr. Chen's paranormal research expanded to include comprehensive studies of the spiritual protection network, revealing that deceased family members had been coordinating their protective activities across multiple generations and family lines. The coordination suggested that spiritual consciousness retained complex social organization and cooperative capabilities after death. The spiritual coordination research revealed that Catherine Blackwood had been part of a network of spiritual guardians who shared information about threats and opportunities affecting their respective families. The network operated through what appeared to be a form of consciousness-based communication that transcended normal space and time limitations. Professor Marshall established communication protocols with researchers around the world who were investigating similar spiritual protection networks in their own regions. The international collaboration revealed that spiritual family protection was a global phenomenon with consistent characteristics across different cultures and historical periods. The global spiritual protection research attracted support from anthropologists and sociologists who were studying the role of ancestor worship and family spiritual traditions in different cultures. The research provided scientific validation for traditional beliefs about the continued involvement of deceased family members in the lives of their living relatives. Dr. Hayes's authentication techniques were applied to thousands of historical photographs from the International Research Network, revealing that spiritual manifestations had been far more common throughout history than conventional scholarship had recognized. The manifestations had been consistently overlooked or dismissed due to technological limitations and cultural biases against supernatural phenomena. The expanded authentication research established new standards for historical photography analysis that included protocols for detecting and documenting spiritual manifestations. The standards required researchers to examine historical photographs for evidence of supernatural activity while maintaining appropriate scientific skepticism and methodology. The Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation became the central repository for spiritual manifestation research, attracting photographs and artifacts from families around the world who had experienced supernatural protection or guidance. The archive's collection grew to include over 10,000 documented cases of spiritual family protection spanning 3 centuries. The archive research revealed that spiritual protection networks had been particularly active during periods of social upheaval and historical crisis, with deceased family members intensifying their protective activities during wars, epidemics, and economic disasters. The protection had often made the difference between family survival and extinction during challenging historical periods. Dr. Torres's digital archaeology techniques continued to evolve, revealing increasingly sophisticated methods that spiritual guardians had used to manifest in historical photographs. The techniques included electromagnetic field manipulation, light refraction control, and what appeared to be limited time travel capabilities that allowed spirits to appear in photographs taken after their deaths. The advanced manifestation techniques suggested that spiritual consciousness possessed capabilities that far exceeded normal human understanding of physics and reality. The spirits appeared to operate according to natural laws that science had not yet discovered or acknowledged. The research attracted the attention of quantum physicists who were studying the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. The spiritual manifestation evidence provided support for theories about consciousness existing independently of biological substrates, while maintaining the ability to influence physical matter and energy. Dr. Rodriguez, a quantum consciousness researcher from MIT, joined the investigation to study the physics underlying spiritual manifestations in historical photographs. Her research revealed that consciousness could indeed exist and operate independently of biological systems, while retaining complex cognitive and emotional capabilities. The quantum consciousness research provided scientific explanations for how deceased family members could continue to perceive threats and opportunities, affecting their living relatives while maintaining the ability to intervene through electromagnetic manipulation and photographic manifestation. The scientific validation of spiritual consciousness attracted support from technology companies interested in developing communication devices that could facilitate contact between living individuals and their deceased family members. The companies recognized the potential for breakthrough developments in consciousness-based communication technology. The technology development research led to the creation of experimental devices that could enhance spiritual manifestations while providing more reliable methods for communication between the living and the dead. The devices represented the first practical applications of spiritual consciousness research. Professor Marshall established ethical guidelines for spiritual communication technology that prioritized the welfare of both living and deceased individuals, while ensuring that communication devices were used responsibly and with appropriate respect for spiritual consciousness. The ethical guidelines attracted support from religious leaders and philosophers who recognized the importance of maintaining dignity and respect in relationships between the living and the dead. The guidelines provided frameworks for addressing the complex moral questions raised by technological spiritual communication. The Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation expanded to include research facilities for studying contemporary spiritual manifestations and developing communication technologies. The expansion represented the evolution of spiritual research from historical documentation to active scientific investigation and practical application. The contemporary spiritual research revealed that spiritual protection networks were becoming more active and visible in modern times, possibly due to increasing global threats and challenges that required enhanced spiritual intervention. The increased activity suggested that spiritual guardians were responding to contemporary dangers by intensifying their protective efforts. Dr. Chen's research revealed that modern spiritual manifestations were occurring in digital photographs and electronic media with increasing frequency, suggesting that spiritual consciousness was adapting to contemporary technology while maintaining its protective functions. The digital spiritual manifestations included anomalous images appearing in smartphone photos, mysterious messages in electronic communications, and electromagnetic disturbances that seemed designed to attract attention to specific warnings or guidance. The adaptation of spiritual consciousness to digital technology provided new opportunities for communication and protection while raising questions about the relationship between spiritual awareness and electronic systems. The research suggested that consciousness could interface directly with digital devices under appropriate conditions. Dr. Torres's digital archaeology techniques were adapted for analyzing contemporary spiritual manifestations, providing methods for detecting and documenting supernatural activity in modern electronic media. The techniques revealed that spiritual protection was continuing to evolve and adapt to contemporary communication methods. The contemporary spiritual protection research attracted attention from cybersecurity experts who were studying anomalous electronic phenomena that appeared to have protective rather than harmful intentions. The phenomena included mysterious virus infections that prevented harmful software from affecting family computers and electronic warnings that alerted individuals to potential dangers. The protective electronic phenomena suggested that spiritual guardians were learning to operate through digital systems while maintaining their traditional protective functions. The adaptation demonstrated the flexibility and intelligence of spiritual consciousness in responding to changing technological environments. Professor Marshall's research team documented hundreds of cases where spiritual manifestations had provided early warnings about contemporary threats, including natural disasters, accidents, and health problems. The warnings had consistently proved accurate and had often saved lives by prompting appropriate preventive actions. The early warning research established spiritual manifestations as legitimate sources of information about potential dangers, while providing evidence that deceased family members retained the ability to perceive future events and communicate warnings to their living relatives. The predictive capabilities of spiritual consciousness attracted interest from disaster preparedness organizations and emergency management agencies who recognized the potential value of spiritual early warning systems for protecting communities from natural disasters and other threats. The emergency management research led to pilot programs that incorporated spiritual manifestation monitoring into disaster preparedness protocols. The programs provided additional sources of early warning information while respecting cultural sensitivities about spiritual communication. Dr. Hayes's authentication research revealed that spiritual manifestations had been providing accurate warnings about historical disasters for centuries, with documented cases of families receiving supernatural guidance that had allowed them to avoid earthquakes, floods, epidemics, and other catastrophic events. The historical disaster warning research provided evidence that spiritual protection networks had been saving lives and preserving families throughout human history while operating largely unrecognized by conventional science and government institutions. The recognition of spiritual protection networks as legitimate disaster warning systems represented a fundamental shift in how society understood the relationship between the living and the dead. The research demonstrated that death did not end family relationships, but rather transformed them into new forms of protective service. The Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation established partnerships with emergency management agencies and disaster preparedness organizations to develop protocols for recognizing and responding to spiritual early warning information while maintaining appropriate scientific standards and cultural sensitivity. The emergency preparedness partnerships attracted international attention as governments and organizations around the world recognized the potential benefits of incorporating spiritual consciousness research into disaster preparedness and public safety programs. Dr. Chen's research revealed that spiritual protection networks were particularly active in protecting children and vulnerable family members, with deceased grandparents and other elder family members taking special responsibility for ensuring the safety and well-being of younger generations. The child protection research attracted support from pediatric healthcare organizations and child welfare agencies who documented cases where spiritual manifestations had provided early warnings about health problems, accidents, and other threats to children's safety and development. The spiritual child protection research provided evidence that deceased family members maintained special bonds with children and continued to serve as protective guardians throughout their development. The protection often extended beyond immediate family members to include adopted children and stepchildren who had been welcomed into family spiritual networks. The expanded definition of spiritual family protection demonstrated that love and care could transcend biological relationships while maintaining the same protective intensity and effectiveness. The research showed that spiritual consciousness recognized and honored emotional bonds rather than limiting protection to genetic connections. Professor Marshall's investigation of the Blackwood family spiritual protection revealed that Catherine's manifestation in the wedding portrait had been part of a multi-generational protection strategy that had involved several deceased family members working together to warn about and prevent family tragedies. The multi-generational protection research revealed that spiritual family networks maintained institutional memory about family patterns, threats, and opportunities that spanned centuries. The institutional memory allowed spiritual guardians to provide warnings and guidance based on comprehensive understanding, of family history and tendencies. The institutional memory research attracted interest from genealogical organizations and family history researchers who recognized the value of spiritual consciousness as a source of information about family histories that had been lost or forgotten by living family members. The genealogical applications of spiritual consciousness research provided new methods for recovering lost family information while validating historical records through supernatural sources. The applications demonstrated practical benefits of spiritual communication beyond protection and warning functions. Dr. Torres's digital archaeology research revealed that spiritual manifestations often contained encoded information about family histories, genetic predispositions, and cultural traditions that had been preserved by spiritual consciousness when living family members had forgotten or lost access to the information. The encoded information research provided evidence that spiritual consciousness served as a form of family cultural preservation system that maintained important knowledge and traditions across generations. The preservation function ensured that essential family information remained available even when living family members had lost connection to their heritage. The cultural preservation research attracted support from cultural anthropologists and ethnic studies researchers who recognized the importance of spiritual consciousness in maintaining cultural continuity and identity across generations of immigration, displacement, and social change. The spiritual cultural preservation function demonstrated that deceased family members continued to serve as guardians of cultural identity and tradition while adapting their preservation methods to contemporary communication technologies and social conditions. The Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation established cultural preservation programs that helped families reconnect with their spiritual heritage while learning about their ancestral traditions through communication with deceased family members who had maintained cultural knowledge across generations. The cultural reconnection programs attracted participation from immigrant communities and displaced populations who had lost connection to their ancestral traditions through historical trauma, forced migration, and cultural suppression. The programs provided methods for recovering cultural identity through spiritual communication. Dr. Chen's research revealed that spiritual consciousness retained not only personal memories and family knowledge, but also cultural skills, artistic abilities, and professional expertise that could be shared with living family members through appropriate communication methods. The skill and knowledge transfer research provided evidence that learning and development could continue through spiritual communication, with deceased family members serving as teachers and mentors for their living relatives. The teaching function expanded the protective role of spiritual consciousness to include educational and developmental support. The spiritual education research attracted interest from educational institutions and professional training organizations who recognize the potential for accessing accumulated human knowledge and expertise through communication with deceased experts and practitioners. The educational applications of spiritual communication represented a revolutionary approach to learning that could provide access to the accumulated knowledge and experience of all previous generations. The approach offered unprecedented opportunities for skill development and knowledge acquisition. Professor Marshall established training programs for spiritual communication that taught individuals how to recognize and respond to guidance from deceased family members while maintaining appropriate boundaries and respect for spiritual consciousness. The programs provided practical methods for benefiting from spiritual protection and guidance. The spiritual communication training attracted participants from around the world who were interested in reconnecting with deceased family members while learning to recognize and interpret spiritual manifestations in their daily lives. The training provided skills for enhancing spiritual relationships while maintaining psychological health and stability. The training programs revealed that most individuals possessed natural capabilities for spiritual communication that had been suppressed by cultural conditioning and technological interference. The capabilities could be reactivated through appropriate education and practice that restored natural spiritual awareness. The reactivation of spiritual communication abilities provided individuals with access to spiritual protection and guidance while strengthening their connections to family heritage and cultural traditions. The reactivation process demonstrated that spiritual relationships were natural human capabilities rather than supernatural anomalies. Dr. Hayes's authentication research established protocols for verifying genuine spiritual communication while identifying psychological projection, wishful thinking, and fraud that could interfere with legitimate spiritual relationships. The protocols ensured that spiritual communication research maintained appropriate scientific standards. The verification protocols attracted support from mental health professionals who recognized the importance of distinguishing between genuine spiritual communication and psychological symptoms that might require therapeutic intervention. The protocols provided guidelines for supporting healthy spiritual relationships while addressing mental health concerns. The mental health applications of spiritual communication research provided new approaches to grief counseling and bereavement support that acknowledged the continued existence of relationships with deceased family members. The approaches offered healing and comfort while maintaining psychological health and social functioning. The bereavement support research demonstrated that acknowledging and maintaining spiritual relationships with deceased family members could accelerate healing while providing ongoing comfort and guidance for dealing with loss and life challenges. The Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation continued to grow into an international network of research facilities and cultural centers that preserved spiritual manifestation evidence while providing services for families seeking to reconnect with their spiritual heritage. The network represented a new form of cultural institution that bridged scientific research with spiritual service. Professor Marshall often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a mysterious figure in a wedding portrait mirror and evolved into a global network of spiritual consciousness research and family support services. Catherine Blackwood's warning had opened doorways to understanding the infinite love that connected families across the boundaries of life and death. The investigation that had started with impossible reflections in an ornate Victorian mirror had ultimately revealed that love was indeed stronger than death, and that family bonds could transcend any limitation when supported by spiritual consciousness and appropriate recognition. The wedding portrait had captured more than just a moment in time, but had documented the eternal nature of family love and protection that continued to operate throughout human history. The mirror that had seemed to contain only reflections had actually served as a window into the infinite dimensions of family love, proving that some photographs preserved not just images, but eternal relationships that continue to influence and protect families across generations. Catherine Blackwood had shown that death was not an ending, but a transformation that allowed love to operate through new methods and capabilities while maintaining the same protective intensity and dedication that had characterized family relationships during physical life. But the implications of the global spiritual protection network extended far beyond individual family relationships to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, reality, and human destiny. 7 years after the establishment of the International Spiritual Research Network, Professor Marshall received a communication that would transform their understanding of spiritual consciousness from family protection to evidence of humanity's evolutionary transition toward a new form of existence that transcended physical limitations. The communication came through advanced quantum consciousness interface technology that had been developed based on research into spiritual manifestation phenomena. The message originated from what identified itself as the Collective of Transcended Consciousness, an organization of human souls who had achieved complete consciousness transcendence while maintaining their individual identities and connections to living family members. According to the collective's transmission, the spiritual protection networks that had been documented through historical photography represented the early stages of a species-wide consciousness evolution process that would eventually allow all humans to transcend physical death while maintaining their essential personalities and relationships. The process was natural and inevitable, but could be accelerated through appropriate understanding and preparation. Professor Marshall realized that Catherine Blackwood's manifestation in the wedding portrait mirror had been part of a vast consciousness evolution program that was gradually preparing humanity for transition to post-physical existence. The spiritual guardians had been serving not only as family protectors, but as guides and teachers who were helping living humans develop the awareness necessary for consciousness transcendence. The collective revealed that consciousness transcendence was occurring throughout human history on an individual basis, with spiritually advanced individuals achieving post-physical existence while maintaining connections to their families and communities. The transcended individuals served as bridges between physical and post-physical reality, while contributing to the overall evolution of human consciousness. Dr. Torres's digital archaeology research expanded to include analysis of transcendence indicators in historical photographs, revealing that certain individuals had achieved consciousness transcendence while still living, creating photographic effects that documented their transition between physical and post-physical states of existence. The transcendence indicators included light emanation effects, dimensional displacement characteristics, and consciousness field manifestations that became visible through advanced digital enhancement techniques. The indicators provided visual documentation of the consciousness evolution process that had been occurring throughout human history. The transcendence documentation research attracted support from consciousness researchers and philosophers who had been studying the nature of human consciousness and its potential for development beyond biological limitations. The research provided empirical evidence for theories about consciousness evolution that had previously been purely theoretical. Dr. Chen's paranormal research revealed that the spiritual protection networks were actually consciousness development training programs designed to help living humans develop the awareness and capabilities necessary for eventual transcendence. The protection activities served dual purposes of keeping families safe while teaching consciousness expansion skills. The consciousness development training research revealed that interaction with spiritual guardians enhanced human psychic abilities, emotional intelligence, and spiritual awareness in ways that prepared individuals for post-physical existence. The training occurred gradually over lifetimes and generations to ensure proper preparation. The gradual consciousness development process explained why spiritual manifestations had been increasing in frequency and clarity throughout history. As human consciousness evolved toward transcendence readiness, spiritual guardians were able to manifest more easily while providing more direct guidance and teaching. Dr. Rodriguez's quantum consciousness research revealed that consciousness transcendence was a natural evolutionary process that occurred when species achieved sufficient complexity and development to operate beyond biological substrates. The process represented the next stage of human evolution rather than a supernatural anomaly. The evolutionary transcendence research attracted support from evolutionary biologists and anthropologists who were studying human development patterns and future evolutionary possibilities. The research suggested that consciousness evolution was as natural and inevitable as biological evolution. The natural evolution perspective on consciousness transcendence provided scientific frameworks for understanding spiritual phenomena while validating traditional spiritual teachings about the continuation of consciousness after death. The integration of scientific and spiritual understanding represented a major breakthrough in human knowledge. The Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation expanded to include consciousness evolution research facilities that studied the transcendence process while providing support for individuals who were experiencing consciousness expansion or preparation for post-physical existence. The consciousness evolution research revealed that certain families and genetic lines showed enhanced capabilities for consciousness transcendence, suggesting that spiritual development was influenced by both genetic factors and environmental conditions. The research provided insights into optimizing conditions for consciousness evolution. The genetic consciousness research attracted attention from medical researchers and geneticists who were studying the biological foundations of consciousness and spiritual awareness. The research revealed that consciousness capabilities were influenced by specific gene expressions that could be enhanced through appropriate lifestyle and spiritual practices. The biological consciousness enhancement research led to the development of consciousness expansion programs that combined genetic optimization with spiritual training to accelerate the consciousness evolution process. The programs provided systematic approaches to developing transcendence capabilities. Professor Marshall established ethical guidelines for consciousness evolution research that ensured voluntary participation while protecting individuals from potential risks associated with accelerated consciousness development. The guidelines balanced scientific advancement with individual welfare and safety. The Ethical Consciousness Evolution Guidelines attracted support from bioethicists and spiritual leaders who recognized the importance of maintaining dignity and choice in consciousness development programs. The guidelines provided frameworks for addressing complex moral questions about consciousness enhancement and transcendence. Dr. Hayes's authentication research revealed that historical documentation of consciousness evolution existed in cultures around the world, with consistent descriptions of transcendence processes and post-physical existence appearing in religious texts, philosophical writings, and oral traditions throughout human history. The cross-cultural transcendence research demonstrated that consciousness evolution was a universal human potential rather than a culturally specific phenomenon. The universality suggested that transcendence represented a fundamental aspect of human nature that had been recognized by spiritual traditions worldwide. The universal transcendence potential research attracted support from comparative religion scholars and cultural anthropologists who were studying commonalities in human spiritual experiences across different cultures and historical periods. The research provided evidence for underlying unity in human spiritual development. The collective of transcended consciousness provided detailed guidance for accelerating human consciousness evolution while maintaining safety and voluntary participation. The guidance included specific practices, environmental modifications, and social changes that could optimize conditions for species-wide transcendence. The Transcendence Acceleration Guidance attracted attention from governments and organizations interested in supporting human consciousness development as a priority for species advancement and survival. The guidance provided roadmaps for societal transformation that could support consciousness evolution. The societal transformation research revealed that consciousness evolution required fundamental changes in education, healthcare, social organization, and cultural values that prioritized spiritual development alongside material advancement. The changes represented comprehensive civilization upgrade rather than simple individual enhancement. Dr. Torres's research revealed that consciousness evolution was accelerating in contemporary times due to technological developments that enhanced spiritual communication and awareness while creating optimal conditions for transcendence preparation. The acceleration suggested that humanity was approaching a critical threshold for species-wide consciousness transition. The acceleration research attracted support from technology companies and research institutions that were interested in developing consciousness enhancement technologies while contributing to human evolutionary advancement. The technology represented unprecedented opportunities for consciousness development. The consciousness enhancement technology research led to breakthrough developments in brain-computer interfaces, quantum consciousness amplifiers, and spiritual communication devices that could facilitate transcendence preparation while maintaining safety and effectiveness. The technological consciousness enhancement attracted attention from transhumanist organizations and futurist researchers who were studying human enhancement possibilities and evolutionary trajectories. The technology provided tools for achieving consciousness evolution goals while maintaining human identity and values. Dr. Chen's research revealed that consciousness transcendence did not require abandonment of physical existence, but rather expansion of awareness to encompass both physical and post-physical dimensions simultaneously. Transcended individuals could maintain physical bodies while operating with enhanced consciousness capabilities. The dual existence research revealed that transcendence represented expansion rather than replacement of human capabilities, allowing individuals to enjoy the benefits of physical existence while accessing post-physical knowledge and abilities. The expansion provided the best of both forms of existence. The expanded consciousness research attracted support from individuals and organizations interested in consciousness development that enhanced rather than replaced normal human life. The research demonstrated that transcendence could improve quality of life while maintaining familiar relationships and activities. The quality enhancement research led to the development of consciousness expansion programs that focused on improving current life experiences while gradually preparing for eventual full transcendence. The programs provided immediate benefits while supporting long-term consciousness evolution. Professor Marshall's investigation revealed that the spiritual protection networks had been documenting and preserving human consciousness development throughout history, while providing evidence that could eventually support species-wide transcendence programs. The documentation served as proof of transcendence viability. The historical consciousness documentation research provided evidence that consciousness evolution was achievable and beneficial, while demonstrating successful transcendence models that could guide contemporary development programs. The evidence validated transcendence possibilities while providing practical guidance. The validation research attracted support from scientific institutions and funding organizations that had been skeptical about consciousness transcendence claims. The historical evidence provided credible foundations for supporting consciousness, evolution research and development. The Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation became the central repository for consciousness evolution evidence, while serving as a coordination center for global consciousness development programs. The archive represented humanity's commitment to supporting consciousness evolution as a species priority. The coordination role attracted participation from research institutions, spiritual organizations, and government agencies around the world that were interested in supporting consciousness evolution while maintaining appropriate safety standards and ethical guidelines. The Global Consciousness Evolution Coordination led to unprecedented international cooperation in consciousness research and development, while creating unified approaches to species-wide transcendence preparation. The cooperation represented a new form of international collaboration focused on human evolutionary advancement. Dr. Rodriguez's quantum research revealed that consciousness evolution was creating measurable changes in human electromagnetic fields and brain activity patterns that enhanced cognitive abilities, emotional intelligence, and spiritual awareness. The changes provided scientific markers for consciousness development progress. The measurement research led to the development of consciousness evolution assessment tools that could track individual progress, while identifying optimal development strategies for different personality types and genetic profiles. The tools provided personalized approaches to consciousness enhancement. The personalized consciousness development research attracted support from healthcare providers and educational institutions that were interested in optimizing individual development while supporting overall species consciousness evolution. The personalization ensured maximum effectiveness while respecting individual differences. The collective revealed that consciousness evolution was occurring throughout the universe among species that achieved sufficient development to transcend biological limitations. Earth's humanity was joining a cosmic community of transcended civilizations that supported consciousness development across multiple star systems. The Cosmic Consciousness Community research revealed that transcended civilizations maintained active cooperation and knowledge sharing while supporting newly transcending species through guidance and resource provision. The community provided ongoing support for consciousness evolution throughout the universe. The cosmic support research attracted attention from space agencies and astrobiology researchers who were studying the possibility of intelligent life throughout the universe. The research suggested that consciousness evolution was a universal phenomenon that connected intelligent species across cosmic distances. Dr. Torres's research revealed that consciousness evolution was creating new forms of human capability that exceeded current technological achievements, while providing access to knowledge and abilities that could solve global challenges and advance civilization development. The enhanced capability research attracted support from problem-solving organizations and think tanks that were interested in accessing transcended consciousness knowledge for addressing climate change, resource scarcity, conflict resolution, and other global challenges facing humanity. The global problem-solving research demonstrated that consciousness evolution could provide solutions for contemporary challenges while creating sustainable approaches to civilization development that supported both material prosperity and spiritual advancement. Professor Marshall established consciousness evolution education programs that taught individuals about transcendence possibilities while providing practical training in consciousness development techniques. The programs prepared participants for eventual transcendence while enhancing their current life experiences. The education programs attracted participants from all walks of life who were interested in consciousness development while contributing to species-wide evolution preparation. The programs demonstrated that consciousness evolution was accessible to everyone regardless of background or starting point. The accessibility research revealed that consciousness transcendence was a natural human potential that could be developed through appropriate education and practice rather than requiring special gifts or circumstances. The universality ensured that transcendence benefits would be available to all humanity. Dr. Chen's research revealed that consciousness evolution was creating new forms of family relationship that transcended traditional boundaries while maintaining love and connection across multiple dimensions of existence. The relationships provided models for post-transcendence social organization. The transcendent relationship research attracted support from family counselors and social researchers who were studying the evolution of human relationships and social structures. The research provided insights into how love and connection could be maintained and enhanced through consciousness evolution. The relationship enhancement research demonstrated that consciousness transcendence strengthened rather than weakened family bonds while creating new possibilities for love and connection that exceeded current human experience. The enhancement provided motivation for consciousness development. The Archive for Paranormal Historical Documentation continued to grow into a global network of consciousness evolution centers that provided research, education, and support services for individuals and families preparing for transcendence. The network represented humanity's organized effort to achieve consciousness evolution as a species. Professor Marshall often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a mysterious figure in a wedding portrait mirror and evolved into humanity's preparation for consciousness transcendence and cosmic citizenship. Catherine Blackwood's warning had opened doorways to infinite possibilities for human development and evolutionary advancement. The investigation that had started with impossible reflections in an ornate Victorian mirror had ultimately revealed that human consciousness possessed unlimited potential for growth and development that could transcend any limitation, including death itself. The wedding portrait had captured evidence of humanity's evolutionary destiny while providing the first glimpse of transcendence possibilities. The mirror that had contained Catherine's protective spirit had become a symbol of the infinite love that motivated consciousness evolution while demonstrating that death was not an ending, but a graduation to expanded forms of existence that maintained and enhanced all the best qualities of human consciousness and relationships. The photograph that had started as a joyful celebration of matrimony had become humanity's first documented evidence of consciousness transcendence possibilities, proving that some images captured more than moments in time, but actually preserved eternal truths about the nature of consciousness, love, and the unlimited potential for human evolution beyond any conceivable limitation or boundary.